T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Kush's Corner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight, I am joined once again in co-hosting duties by my good friend Alex Myers. And tonight we have Clint Bartley of Metazotics on the show to talk all things reptile business, the state of the market, how to successfully run a retail store, and much, much more. But before we get into that conversation, as always, USARC. So USARC is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to live this lifestyle we all enjoy so much. Check out usarc.org for all of the information you need to know about the organization, and for any new information you need to know about legislation hitting us on either a national or any local levels. And also, if you're not already a member of USARC, please look into becoming a member. As a community, we have strength in numbers, and the more people that are behind the cause, the better. And here we are. Thank you to everyone for being here on this Wednesday evening. For anyone who is here on YouTube, if you're not already, please subscribe to the channel, comment, like, share, do all that stuff. A new podcast drops here every single day of the week on the channel from some of the best hosts in the game, talking about a wide variety of different reptile-related topics. So if you are a fan of reptile-related audio content, you have found the right place. We are not only on YouTube, though. We are in audio-only format on all of the audio platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. A follow, 5-star review, and a comment on any of those platforms would be most appreciated. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let's bring Alex onto the show. How's it going, Alex? Good to be back with you here again. 2 weeks in a row. You're this is no casual co-hosting anymore. This is serious stuff.
Well, hey, I mean, if it's a chance to talk with the dudes running CCR, and have them bring their knowledge and experience to Kush's Corner, why not? I'm a big fan of their show, and it's your show, Steven. It's definitely your show, but I will definitely appreciate any opportunities I have to co-host and talk to some of the other, in my eyes, big and serious hobbyists. So
if you wanted to be here every week, I would be all for that. So as always, when you're here. So I know we just talked last week, but any new developments you want to share since we last spoke?
Well, before we went live off stage, I had to quickly dart out. So literally right now, there's Philippine elephants copulating right now. And they've been locked for 12 minutes.
Oh, all right.
Fingers crossed. Before I hopped on in the backstage and got into StreamYard, I saw they had copulated. I just threw them together, and then I peeked again as we were talking with Clint off stage, and they're still locked up. So now I'm just not gonna look and hope for good things to come.
Wow. I mean, so when you said you just threw them together, how just did you throw them together? Like today?
Like 20 minutes ago. Yeah.
Well, okay, so wasted no time at all. Just went right to it.
Yeah. I threw her in. This female's particularly she's psychotic. I hate to say it, there's no tame way to carefully grab her and try and pair her. It's grab her and hope she doesn't shoot around and try and bite you. She's bitten me through the glove once, so make no mistake. She's got some teeth on her. But as soon as she went in, the male, he did his whole thing. He went all purple on his chest, flared up his nuchal crest, and I walked out of the room because I didn't want to stress her more than anything. And then when I took a quick peek, they were on the floor, locked up and copulating. So
wow,
we'll see what happens. Yeah, so, she had stopped eating a couple days ago, and she started to swell. So I was wondering if something was up.
Yeah. So based on where she's at now and this copulation, if everything goes well and you get a clutch, how long are you looking between now and then?
Probably about 35 days. From what this girl's done with her infertile clutches, it's about 35 days because she's younger. But now that she's older, all the data that I got from Scott Corning when I visited him of his females that had laid fertile eggs, it's about 45 days. So we'll see what happens, right? But it's exciting, just to see them copulate. A lot of the lizards I keep are very secretive about that. So you know, I think it's just because it's a vulnerable position for them to be in if a predator were to attack them. So, you know, I just sort of try and watch the females and wait till I dig up eggs, especially with water dragons. I think I've said it before on the show, and I know I've told you, you know, this is my 7th year breeding Asian water dragons. I've only ever seen 3 blocks.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I just sort of watch the girls and wait till they start digging and they do their thing. But to actually see a confirmed lock from these two is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, dude, that's freaking awesome. Yeah, hopefully that works. Would that? You know, I'm not going to ask that question. I'll let that one be for a future episode when we have more to talk about. So anyway,
for sure.
Well, that's awesome. So with that said, what should our listeners know about our guest tonight?
Yeah, Mr. Clint Bartley, owner of Metazotics. However, if you've been around in the hobby for a while, you would have known him under Bartley Reptiles. And so presently, he's definitely incredibly well known now as one of the hosts for the Colubrid and Colubroid radio podcast, which is on the Morelia Python network. Really awesome guy. I love listening and hearing his point of view, especially he's more along the business side. And then last week we interviewed Zach, who's Zach's a conservation biologist. So the two of them really represent herpetoculture in the most literal phrase of the word, you know, saying two sides of the same coin. They both like snakes, but one is very, you know, focused on that scientific conservation side. And Clint is very, you know, passionate, and he's definitely, you know, grown his, you know, you could say business side of the industry into what is now Metazotics. So I'm really excited for our conversation tonight. I think he's going to have a lot of insight to offer for those listening who might want to pursue expanding their hobby, or, you know, at least in my case, you know, I'll fully admit it. Like, I just have a spare room full of lizards that I enjoy breeding and seeing what happens. And, you know, that's what he did with Bartley Reptiles, working with a lot of his snakes privately. So hearing how to think as a small time breeder, which is what I would consider myself as, somebody who's not doing this full time, as well as hearing his insights on what made him choose to quite literally upgrade into Metazotics might encourage some people to think of what they're currently doing and how to progress themselves in the industry side of herpetoculture.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So how about we bring him on?
I think that's a great idea. All right. Good evening, Clint. How's it going?
Going well, guys. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. Better now. Been I know I can speak for myself and probably Alex. It's been a bit of a hectic day running around, but glad we're finally able to chill out. I mean, I'd have to imagine for you as well. So
every day's hectic. There's always something. I mean, today's my day off, but you know, that just means if I'm not in the shops, I'm working from the computer and, you know, doing whatever. And even today, just doing kind of off-site prep for a 2-day show this weekend. That we'll probably be running more tables than we've ever ran. So, interesting. But before we move past it, congrats, Alex, man, on the sale fields. That's awesome, man.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
Fingers crossed. Everybody complains about infertility with sail fins, which I think is weird. So I don't know if it's a husbandry thing. I mean, for reference, I sent a photo of the copulation to my friend. So the male is currently with me on loan. And they've had this lizard living with a female for 7 years. Not a single clutch of eggs out of that female. Not a single sign of breeding. So I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, maybe he just, you know, needed a new girlfriend. But which some people do, I guess, or some lizards do too. But we'll see what happens in a few months.
Very nice.
Oh yeah. Nice. So, Clint, for anyone who's listening or watching who's not familiar with you or your podcast, can you give us a little bit of a rundown of your story in the industry, kind of where you started and what got you to where you're at today?
Oh, gosh, that's a big story.
We have time.
I'm an old man. So, you know, first, I mean, the passion started like I think it did for a lot of us, where I was a kid that just, you know, enjoyed catching lizards, catching frogs.
Sure.
You know, and I caught my first Eastern Black King snake when I was 6 years old, and I loved it. I'd always loved snakes, but then I had this little baby, snake that was now going to be mine, and I had it for at least 24 hours. And I'm showing it off to a friend. It bites me. I get scared and fling it and then start crying because I lost it in the grass. But just always, I've just always adored them and studied them, and they've been a part of my life. I mean, really since childhood. And I instantly, even at 7, 8 years old, I wanted to breed them. I wanted to make more little snakes. I loved the genetic side of it. I loved the thought of being able to take these two, and now I'll have 20, and then I can take those and I can make 80, and then just dug it. And so I actually produced my first snakes at age 11. They were albino, het albino black rat snakes.
Okay.
And it kept going from there. I've enjoyed things all across the board, whether it's, I'm known for colubrids at this point, and they're hands down my passion. But I keep ball pythons. I Burmese. Just mainly snakes.
Sure.
I've done some tortoises and geckos and things as well, but I was always leaned more towards the legless. And it grew over time, and it's funny because I think that there wasn't a year from age 11, there wasn't a year that I didn't produce something.
Okay.
Some reptile every year from that point on. And there were years where I move out, I get my own place, and then I'm down to 3 snakes because things just kind of, life moves you around. And but they were always a constant. They were always consistent for me. And as my career kind of continued to grow, where I was working for a large optical retail company, eyeglasses, basically.
Yeah.
Eyeglasses. And as my career there continued to grow, I found myself traveling all over the country, 4 days a week, at least. And so I was gone a lot, but I still had this collection that was still growing.
Yeah.
And I was doing this for 20 years, the retail optical.
Okay.
And as I was, traveling, I'd come home, I'd spend a day and a half cleaning snakes, feeding snakes, pairing snakes, taking pictures of babies, whatever, running everything. And eventually it got to a point where I've got 3 kids. I was losing a day and a half of the very few days I was home each week in the first place down there. I wanted to spend more time with them. I had to make a decision on, I either need to cut way back or jump way in. It's got to be one or the other. And I'd gotten to where I wasn't completely thrilled with what I was doing anymore. My job was great. Everybody on my team was absolutely wonderful. It's I think, one of those stories where it for me, over my career there, I reported to 16 different people, which no problem, because I got along fantastic with 15 of them. It's number 16 that it was kind of like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this anymore. So, talked to the family, and we kind of made the decision that, I've wanted to do this since I was 6 years old. Let's jump. I saw the opportunity in the area. I saw where the niche could come into play. We had a good foundation with the size of the collection that we already had.
Okay.
And after COVID money, because if you were breeding through COVID, you probably did pretty well, because everyone was sitting at home playing on their phones with, a little bit of stimulus, money as well. So with that, it's, we can buy the building, we can make this go. And that's what we did. So.
Wow. So when you said you saw the local market, niche that you could fulfill, what exactly do you mean by that? And what were the signs that that was even there in the first place where you would be able to be successful?
So we have a local reptile show that, I guess, let me back up.
Okay.
When I was 16, 15, I worked at the local pet store that
Yeah.
was here for 30, 40 years, and it eventually closed probably 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And that was at one point the hub for the reptile community. Um, like all of us that have gray in the beards now, or any of the ladies in our age group, even younger,
Yeah.
we all met each other standing in that pet store
Okay.
because there was the lady that ran the reptile department was a mentor of mine and was probably a mentor to half of the people anywhere near my age in this area on reptiles because she's just
Okay.
dynamite. So again, so many of us that I think some of you have probably heard me talk about Steve, who works here at Metazotics that
Hmm.
handles the collection. I met Steve standing in harps, in that pet store.
Cool.
So we knowing how kind of small that community was back then to seeing how successful, or at least the number of people through the doors at the local reptile show here in Evansville now,
Yeah.
and the many people that I'd meet in the process. um, I've watched that show grow
Okay.
over the years, and we really didn't have a dedicated reptile store. The closest thing we had was the individuals who run the show. They had a shop where it was basically ball pythons and feeder rodents. And they
Okay.
started to get a little bit of an expansion on it, but that was pretty much it. That's actually the location that we have taken over in January, and it became our second location. Um, so I knew that there was a need because you had, if you wanted supplies, you were going to PetSmart.
Yeah.
And we know you're not going to get all that much of a selection on reptile
Yeah.
supplies there. Maybe Pet Supplies Plus you'd go to. And so I didn't want to compete with dog food. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't
Sure.
want to open a pet store because going up against the powerhouses, we have another local chain of pet stores that they do real well in that niche and that market as well. But that's not what I wanted. I didn't want a pet store. I
Yeah.
wanted a reptile specialty store that it was almost like an event. It was an experience when you came
Okay.
into it.
Sure.
And while we still have, I mean, there's going to be places that you go to that are going to have much, big enclosures and, a lot more money that have been dumped into the walls, is what I would say, that make it look a certain
Okay.
way. Um, I knew that I wanted that place that kind of brought me back to that pet store when I was
Mm.
15,
Okay.
that gathering place, that place where
Yeah.
we met so many people that were into this. I mean, here at the shop, we have a sitting area right there in the middle of the floor with
Mm.
couches and chairs for people to there's people who've come in, sat and eaten their lunch there just to be
Yeah.
around either the animals or like-minded individuals, that
Sure.
love this too. So I saw that there were things that obviously, if I would put them within these four walls, little heat tape, you're never going to find heat tape at PetSmart, and
Yeah.
those kind of things. If all these things that you normally see maybe online, or if you're lucky they're at a show, but now you can walk in and get them right then and there. I knew that I knew there'd be a market for it. How successful? That's where we're rolling the dice. But
Sure.
I had a feeling that we could create the right environment, the right buzz,
Mm.
and really make something special happen.
So then how did that process go of trying to tap into the local market once you guys actually got up and running there?
So luckily, I've been doing it so long, the Bartley Reptiles name was out there, and
Sure.
so when we made that, and it opened it, there were friends involved, and So really, when we just announced that it was coming, it was a lot of attention just on
Okay.
social media.
Cool.
Everyone was sharing it. I mean, I was absolutely astonished that on our grand opening, so the day we open our door, here we are, just this, small reptile shop.
Yeah.
The we didn't spend any money on advertising. I mean, it was all just social media shares and
Yeah.
whatnot. I think we probably had between 300 and 400 people through our door that first day. So it definitely, it was spread. The word was spread, and it's funny. I think back on that first day compared to today, and we literally have at least 12 to 15 times the inventory that we did that first day. It's expanded that
Really?
much.
That significantly.
And so yeah, and we just, we went in that direction, and, we really have relied a lot on social media. And I mean, we've not even hit our 3-year mark. And I want to say
Yeah.
our Facebook page is somewhere around, we're getting close to 8,000 likes, something like that. So,
Okay.
and it's understanding that, yes, there are certainly areas that I probably should put some money on, the marketing piece. Now that we have 2 locations, it makes more sense. But just harnessing the power of social media to a degree is certainly helpful.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely an interesting thing these days, where I feel like, 20 years ago or whatever, part of a business is, a plan, the business plan you come up with when you start your company is money you spend on marketing. And now, you theoretically don't need to do that anymore. Or like, not, this is an apolitical thing I'm bringing up, but like Tesla pre Elon going all, political, he was publicly like, we don't have a marketing department. I'm the marketing. And it's like, the amount of money that a company like Tesla would have to spend on marketing, that's brilliant if you as your figurehead could not need to spend any money on marketing because you have such a pull as you yourself. So, I mean, where would you theoretically dump money into marketing in this day and age with how present you already are online?
So I'll tell you what, there's a couple ways that I do it now. The first, since we do local shows and regional shows, I spend a little bit of money on flyers.
Okay.
And it's basically because at every show, you have to think about it. The people who are walking through those doors are of the mindset to shop at your shop. If they're at a reptile show, they probably like reptiles. So these are where you want to get your name, and you want something tangible. Business cards, yeah, I have them, but they get lost. I mean, they're
throw it in your
kind of
wallet and forget about it.
yeah, people like to just pick them up, but then they don't really keep them, or they end up in a stack somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
Where instead, we have flyers that gives a brief, some nice pictures. Here's things we carry, feeders, all this, but also 10% off if you bring this into the shop.
Okay.
That flyer. So
Yeah.
it's driving them in, and that's how we approach the local shows. Is even if we don't sell anything there, we're there to pass out flyers. We're there to send people to the shop, and because we are firm believers, if they walk into this store once, they're hooked, because it's going to be an experience. And that comes from having a great team. I say that right off the bat. I see in the chat that Corey is on. Corey takes care of our nursery. She's one of our newer hires.
Cool. Very nice.
She's doing fantastic.
Man, it must be a nice work environment if after work you're willing to listen to your boss for 2 hours. That's crazy.
Well, what's funny is I walk into the nursery and she'll be listening to CCR. I walk on the floor and they'll have CCR up on the TV. So
man.
Yeah,
I would not stand for that.
But it's so having a good team that they're not only good at what they do, but they love what they do.
Sure.
And so the people that come in feel that, they see the care that the animals are given. They walk in expecting to smell rodent or to, you know what I mean? Just no,
it's the pet store, but then
right. And so, we're brightly lit. It's not dim. It's just everything. And all this are things that I been able to take over the last 20 years from what I would do in, you know, my previous roles. So that's one area that we spend marketing dollars on, or just flyers, and that's not anything expensive. Number two, the reason it makes sense now to be able to put more money in marketing. Here's your first business kind of tip for anyone who's listening.
We should have it flashing on the screen right now.
Yeah. But it's something that I was taught before that I didn't really think of.
Okay.
So whenever you're thinking about business or opening a business, most people are still in the top line mentality, meaning how much money, how much you're doing in sales.
Yeah. What am I bringing in?
You know, hey, that's flashy. That's great to brag about, but it's the bottom line that really matters. It's everything in between is where your control needs to take place.
Right.
So whenever, and I'm just going to make up a number here, but let's say I am going to spend $10,000 on marketing. I'm not. But let's say I'm
for argument's sake.
Right. Let's say I'm going to spend $10,000 on marketing. Whenever I have one store, that's $10,000 off the bottom line immediately. Okay. Sure. And let's say that $10,000 was going into a commercial.
Yeah.
You know, whether TV or YouTube, whatever, Facebook. So if that was going into that, that's $10,000 off the bottom line of one store. But now we have two. And the two stores are 30 minutes apart.
Okay.
We can spend the same amount on marketing, that $10,000 commercial, but at the end, instead of you having one address, you have two addresses.
Yeah.
And it's still in the same marketable area that you would be targeting, you know, that radius. So by doing that now, that $10,000 spend now only becomes $5,000 off the bottom line of each location.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why now with two stores, and eventually if we get 3 or 4 within this market area, then the advertising spend makes more sense because it's dispersed amongst multiple locations. Just because you're putting more, even my flyers, I got 2 addresses on them now. So that cost got split into 2 stores.
Sure.
So I haven't done too much other than like that we'll put wind flags out front to catch eyes, you know, on the street. Sure. But we are now working on kind of making like a Facebook ad that has moving picture, you know, video, that kind of thing. Because I feel that we have, I got a bit of a wake up call, and I don't think it was ego. It was more, we are so popular in this area here in Chandler, which is just outside of Evansville, Indiana. I live in Evansville. We're so popular here that I think we started to think just, well, everybody knows who Metazotics is, you know, in this area.
Yeah.
But when we took over the store in Henderson, Kentucky, which again, just 30 minutes away, I was floored by the number of people as we're explaining when they come in, the transition and what's happening. They didn't know who we were. Which tells, now again, there's I've talked on the show before about this geographical barrier. It's in their mind, this mental barrier where people have in Henderson, Kentucky. They don't want to cross the Ohio Bridge to Indiana if they don't have to.
Sure.
And so that 5 more minutes of driving, it's just this wall for them. And so if they could get feeders or whatnot in Henderson, there's no need for them to ever know who Metazotics was.
Yeah.
Even if, you know, that store had a lot more to offer in terms of supplies or whatever. So it tells me that it's probably a good idea for me to run about a 50-mile radius of Evansville, actually, because that hits both of our stores. If I do that with advertising on like Facebook to local individuals, not just reptile individuals, it's probably going to be in our best interest to get more attention.
So I was in Indianapolis for 5 years, but I never made it down to Evansville, that area. How big is the Evansville metropolitan area as far as you would extrapolate that out from actual Evansville? Like what's the population?
So I think Evansville's population's around 90,000, I believe, 90 to
Okay.
110, somewhere in there. It's the third largest city in Indiana. Indianapolis number one, Fort Wayne number
Fort Wayne.
two, Evansville is number three.
Okay, so bigger than
However,
South Bend.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Um, Now, but it still has a lot of like small town feel. It doesn't feel massive. You don't have
Yeah, sure.
incredible traffic typically. Um, but because of where it's located, Evansville is right where Indiana, Kentucky, and Illinois touch.
Right.
It's the tri state area right there. And it's the biggest city in the tri state area. So you get people from an hour and a half out flooding in, especially, from the south when they have to do their big shopping.
Sure. Okay.
We're that hub. I mean, we're on the Ohio River, so there's a lot of industry that has grown, a lot of production. Toyota plant is just north of Evansville.
Nice.
We have an Alcoa plant. Most of you have products that are made in Evansville in your homes right now, and you don't know it.
Yeah.
A lot of plastics factories, so the job market's pretty decent out here.
That's good.
And it's also conveniently where Evansville sits. We're 2.5 hours north of Nashville, and an hour and a half west of Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
2.5 hours east of St. Louis, and 2.5 hours south of Indianapolis.
Yeah.
So all these major cities, we're dead in the center, of that kind of point. So it's a nice place.
Yeah. So then with all that in mind, what do you think would be the limit, as far as the low limit of where a retail reptile shop like yours could actually survive based on just population alone?
So the bigger the population, obviously, the better.
Sure.
However, let's say I was going to expand in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be in Indianapolis. It'd be on the outskirts of Indianapolis.
Okay. And why?
And that's because
there's the price of retail space.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yep. And because you're not going to have, you have two things that you want to keep in mind. One, it's why I'm not in Evansville yet. I'm in Chandler, right outside of Evansville.
Sure.
It's one, if you go to the outskirts, you're going to have that lower cost, and you need to keep your costs as low as possible, because you don't have super high margined items, in this particular industry, unless you're producing animals yourself.
Right. Yeah.
It certainly helps, but the animals, for example, animals make up 28.9% of our sales in Metazotics. So less than a third.
Pretty high, honestly, compared to what
it
should be. Yeah.
But if I took everything else out of there, we fail.
Of course.
You know? And so the other things are not going to have the margins on like the animals do that we produce ourselves. So that's one. But two, if you are specialty, you are a destination. And especially if you make yourself a destination where it's more than just the supplies. It's an experience. You're walking in to see a bunch of things and, get to enjoy. It's like, for example, our Henderson location, I don't have that yet. I mean, we've got cool things. And it's got all the supplies you need, but we don't have all of the display animals yet, in that location like we have at the Chandler.
Sure.
But we're a much smaller footprint. Our shop here, our facility's 9,000 square feet. The retail floor is a little over 3,200 square feet.
Wow.
Where in Henderson, the entire building is less than 2,400 square feet.
Okay.
And the retail showroom over there is probably 1,700, something like that. So we don't have as much room, to work with, but we want to make sure all the product that they need's there without it feeling overwhelmed. We're just stacked to the ceiling and so that's one. But you want to think, how far do you want to drive for a rodent?
As little as I need to.
Right. So you can't be so far on the outskirts where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And that's also why the 30-minute separation between these two locations works, with that mental geographical barrier in between the two. But then also the same thing's going to apply to Evansville, because we will eventually look to the north side of Evansville, because we're still in that same market, that same circle. However, I live in Evansville, I've lived there all my life. And I've always had the mentality when someone says, well, we can go over to Chandler and get, and I'm like, oh, Chandler, all the way to Chandler. Literally, the biggest shopping area in Evansville, it's 6 minutes from there to my shop in Chandler. 6 minutes.
Really?
But when you live in Evansville, that's so far away,
Yeah.
So that's one piece on why we will be able to add one, in Evansville. But if you live in Evansville, you don't want to cross the bridge to go to Henderson to get anything. So it works. But if you're having to drive more than 20 minutes for your feeders every week, you're less likely. If that's all you need, well, I can get it at this, this other little spot right here. They're more likely to do that.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
so that's where, if you kind of put that in play, and I think that some smaller towns can certainly handle a specialty shop if there's nothing, if you don't have competition when it comes to the consumables. So if people need to get bugs, need to get mice, need to get rats, and there's no one else around, and you have a decent reptile market there, it'll probably be successful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite, and here's an insider thing that I've really not shared with anyone. One of the things that I would be looking at when we expand further than the next 2 locations that I already have in mind, I will be going to reptile shows. I want to see what these regional reptile shows look like. What's the traffic in that door?
Yeah.
And then is there anything in that vicinity that can supply what they are getting at that reptile show on a daily basis? If not,
yeah, for sure,
I'd be looking at it.
There's an opening.
Yeah.
I got a super chat right here from a customer of yours saying that he breeds his own rats for his ball pythons, but if he didn't have you as a backup, it would be rough for him. And yeah, I mean, that's super helpful, and especially if there's someone local to you, that's huge. I mean, not every area has even someone without a storefront who can supply rodents locally.
We appreciate you, Josh. Thanks for the support, buddy.
Yeah. So then, so you said about 29% of what you do is on the live reptile side, and any of the little details, if you want to, don't want to share, no worries at all.
Okay.
But then, what is the ratio, I guess, with that remaining percent of dry goods to feeders?
Feeders are 27.3.
Okay. And
so
then
that should put things in perspective. If you're wanting to open a reptile shop with, the animals, there's 1.5 points difference in volume, not number, but just volume, feeders to animals in terms of sales.
And that's okay. So just revenue share straight up, not looking at units, of course.
Correct.
Wow. I am surprised it's not higher.
It's, I mean, we have a full line of everything else. I mean, habitats make up 18.8% of what we have. It's whenever you're selling so much of anything, it's you start chopping up the categories. Those are our top 3 right there.
Well, and that was less of like I think you should be selling more, and more of like I'm surprised that it's as evenly balanced as that in a retail environment. I've never done this, so this is all very new for me. With your feeders, are you sourcing them mostly or producing them in-house, or how does that work?
We have to do both because between the nearly 700 breeders that we have as far as the collection that we're feeding, plus, supplying to, we're doing okay with supplementing in. We have, just basically 2 sources that we would supplement in. And everything was pretty solid. We never were low on anything. Okay. Once we bought the second location and the individuals we bought it from shut down their breeding, now there's a shortage out here. And so we scramble to make sure that everybody can get taken care of. But we would probably have to expand at least, just off my rough guess, probably 18 to 20 times more racks to be able to fill all needs.
Wow.
On what we have right now.
Yeah, that's
so.
Could imagine so.
We've kind of looked at it where we're probably going to, before opening a third location, it's going to be in our best interest to open up a larger breeding facility for rodents off-site, like a separate site for the rodents.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then, from the standpoint of trying to keep everything going smooth in the totality of your business, what are the things that you're thinking about when even mentally approaching the idea of starting a rodent production facility for yourself, on top of everything you have going on, with now the extra time that you're going to need to put into starting this while everything else is maintained in the background?
So there's like a few pieces. First, finances.
Of course.
How are we going to make this work? There's only so much money in the pot. Whenever you own the business, and I hope this is the mentality that you would have as a business owner. I can't speak for all business owners, just myself. I feel I have a duty to those that work here, where, I need to make sure that their checks are coming through. Yeah. Every pay period, that's top priority, and making sure we're not getting ourselves into poor positions where, money runs low, or, and given there's been times where I'm like, okay, we're done ordering for the month. Give it a couple weeks, give it 4 days and you can start ordering again. And it's one where I've been able to do this from a financial standpoint with money that Metazotics has made, meaning I've not taken loans. Even when we purchased the second location, the only loan that we've ever had is when we purchased the building. That's it. So, and I want to keep it that way, if at all possible. So that's why it's not I don't panic. There's just moments where it's like, okay, we've been spending a lot of money. And I want to make sure the sales end up equating this. Yeah. So, so there's that. The next is year one was just establishing the business. Mm-hmm. And that's just, getting Metazotics open, getting it out there, running around, just trying to figure it all out. Because even with the 20-year experience I had in retail at a pretty high level, there were a lot of things that I didn't know here. And I remember our ZooMed rep, when he asked me when we first opened, and he's like, well, you guys going to carry UVB? And I'm like, no. And that's because I'm a snake guy and I'm not a lizard guy. I hadn't been. And he kind of looked at me like, yeah, you will. Yeah, he's right. You know what I mean? Now we're like on the forefront of wanting the best stuff in it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's because of, the needs. So you just kind of look at, you have to continue to grow no matter how much you think you still are going to. So year one was establishing the business.
Yeah. Okay.
Year two became establishing processes. And that was to try to streamline things, make it make sense, get it efficient, and cut out the errors, cut out the headaches where, just you have your systems in place. And I don't just mean like, electric or whatever, but how you do things, how your team does things, what this process is supposed to look like so that we don't deal with this problem, later. That was really what year two was. Year three, which is where we're still at now, is developing the team. And that means they're already great at what they were doing, but now it's developing where we have our first general manager of the other location, Ox, who was in the nursery. Like I told Corey when we first brought her on, there's not an area in this building that you learn more than in the nursery, because you're dealing with so many different animals. You're learning tips and tricks and how to get them to eat and what this species needs versus that species. And you're doing it so repetitively that, over and over, that you really learn a lot about the animals. So anyways, it's developing people we have Ox and Anna, who both now can go do shows all by themselves.
Okay.
I completely trust them on the animals that if you walk up to that table, they're going to be able to answer your questions. They've got it. And another thing I kind of let people know is if you come on, the team at Metazotics, you're going to have to learn colubrids, because if you stand at our table, there's an expectation when people walk up to it on what your knowledge level is, and we're going to teach you, we're going to help you, but it's going to be a lot to learn. So anyways, it's getting them to where they can do more of the things that before it was only I could do.
Sure.
And as the team continues to develop and become stronger and stronger, then I'm able to step further and further away from certain pieces, which allows my attention to go on to, all right, let's get the rodent facility up, and let's get, what that looks like. So that's really what it is, you have to have those pieces in place. If you're someone who it's not right unless I do it, you are going to fail, because you can't. You have to be able to rely on the most important resource in your business, and that's the people that are there with you. And don't be afraid to, I can be stupid. I mean, I have no problem if someone comes and asks me a question about this tarantula for me to go, I'm not your guy. I don't know. Let me get Anna. She's my invert person. She's on it. Or they, know more about this particular gecko, or, what have you. And it's surround yourself with people that have expertise in areas you don't, and then build them in your expertise to continue to allow you more freedom to move on to the business pieces.
Sure. Yeah, that was something that I personally really struggled with, early on, managing a team with no business or management experience, was was delegating and being patient enough to train people, not being caught up in the moment of I'm stressed out and it's already late, and thinking like a month ahead of, okay, if I take this time now to actually do this right and to elevate the people around me, I might not be in the same stressed out mode that I am right now that much further later. So I guess, what's your process from a hiring and team building standpoint? Because it's very clear listening to you talk that's, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but probably the thing that you're most passionate about as far as growing your business and maintaining it. So yeah, I guess kind of open-ended, but from a hiring and team building standpoint, what are some of your philosophies?
So I am a firm believer that I hire for personality, not experience.
Okay.
You can have all the experience in the world,
Yeah.
but if you don't have I look at it as, I can train you to do the job. I can teach you about the animals. I can't give you a personality. You've either got it or you don't. I can't
Sure.
do anything there. So that's very important to me, is, what kind of energy am I getting during an interview? What I've got, again, understand I've been doing this for a very long time. I mean, to the point, not only do I do interviews, I teach people how to interview. That was what I used to do, or part of it. And I'm, used to interviewing from a sales associate level up to a district manager, and, everything in between. So understanding what it is I'm looking for, what position, and what type of attitude that position is going to need. Because I look at it as mistakes are going to happen, and I don't mind that.
Sure.
I don't get, angry when a mistake happens, unless it's repeated, over and over. But a bad attitude or a disrespectful attitude, and I don't mean just towards me, towards anyone,
Sure.
not going to fly. It's you will be gone very quickly, if that happens. And in fact, I that's another thing I tell everybody. We have this sit down talk whenever someone's hired, because my wife does the interviews a lot. She was a district manager at the same company that I was, so
Okay.
she's got this experience too. She'll do a lot of the interviews, and just when she's kind of narrowed it down, she's like, okay, talk to them, make sure that you're good with it too. And I will then, once we've brought someone on, they have the Clint talk, and that's where I'll tell them, no matter what, you're going to be treated with respect, but I expect you to treat everyone else with respect at the same time, even when we're angry. Even if I'm fuming at something, I'm not going to cuss at you. I'm not going to scream at you. You'll be treated with respect. And I think that's important. I think it's important to, it's okay to care about the people you work with
Yeah.
as a leader. As long as you don't take it to a point where you're afraid to discipline if you need to, or afraid to correct them if you need to. And I think that eventually, as long as, because discipline sounds like such a bad word and it usually sounds like a punishment, but I mean, individuals in the Army are disciplined,
Right.
right? And so it's, if you are peppering in correction instead of having to have this big sit down hour long, here's everything that you've done wrong. If you're just peppering in and giving feedback immediately, it doesn't feel like discipline. It doesn't feel negative. It feels like coaching, because that's what it is. It's coaching. It's getting you better at what it is you're doing. And that's what we do. That's my philosophy. I mean, and the people who work for me, maybe they'll tell you something different, but I care about them. I care about what's going on in their lives. I ask about it. I want to know, but I want to know it while we're working. I want to know it while we're still busy and moving, and getting things done. And I think that they're becoming pretty accustomed to that at this point. But it's, back to the interviewing. I will look at an application to get a quick idea or a resume, and then I put it down and I don't pick it up for the rest of the interview. Because what I'm gauging on is, how do you talk to me?
Sure.
How can you carry on a conversation? Do you answer the questions I ask you, or do you just talk and not really computing things? So that's what I'm looking for.
All right. Well, we have a pretty pointed comment right here.
Oh, Nasarge. I knew it was coming at some point, buddy. Hey, I agree with you. Montane Kings, I'm a big fan of. I mean, we will have these conversations. For those who don't know, there's this ongoing battle between Zach, my co-host on Colubrid and Clubroid Radio, and Nasarge over which king snake is best. There's Team Getula and Team Montane Kings, and those two go at it constantly. And personally, I like them both, but if I have to lean towards one, it's the Montane. So I'm with you, buddy. I agree.
Oh man, I knew something like that was coming this evening.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I want to go back to the point you made about that employee boss relationship. And another thing that I feel like I kind of failed with when I was doing that type of thing. So I guess, how do you set the tone early on that this is a friendly working relationship, but there are lines that if you cross, this is going to be a problem for you? Like, what do you do as the employer to make that known, but in a non-confrontational way, where it's like, okay, now I'm not, banging the gavel on, this is how it is, but how do you set that tone?
Well, I think a lot of times it's not necessarily setting a tone, it's being consistent, and then until they learn you. Really, it's so I state that in the beginning. I hate the whole "we're a family here," because every place you work tells you that, and it's garbage. But it's, so I kind of joke about it, with them, is, you're going, I just tell them what you are going to find, what you're going to see is that this is a safe place. You're able to be you, you're able to talk, you're going to feel, respected, cared about, and appreciated. And if you do something incorrect, you'll be corrected, but it's going to be polite. And so you can say all that in the beginning.
Yeah.
But until you actually live up to that, they're just words. I mean, it's just a selling point when you're trying to hire them. So instead it's, we joke. I laugh. I mean, there's times I'll walk past someone, just hold my hand up and high five them as I'm walking past. Just little things like that to show them that you're just a person, But then when there's something that does need to be corrected, you have to address it immediately, firmly, but you don't carry it the rest of the day. I mean, if I have to bring somebody in here and go, listen, I need you to fix your face. Our customers can see that something is not happy with you today.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about it. If they want to talk about it. If not, I understand. If you change your mind, we can talk about it later. But when you step back out on the floor, the face needs to be fixed. But then if you have one of these conversations that aren't the best for them, where, obviously they feel like they just got in trouble, when you step back out onto your floor, you have to be like that never happened, because you have to let them know we had our moment. That moment's gone. Now we're past it. I guess I have the mentality that when I have to correct someone, I'm not correcting an individual, I'm correcting a behavior.
Sure.
And so I've addressed that behavior. Now me and the individual can get back to who we are and what we're normally about.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it helps them get past it a little bit faster, you know, whenever
Sure.
you do have to have those negative. But whenever, it's kind of like whenever you were in trouble from your parents, as long as you had parents that you knew loved you,
Yeah.
they could get on to you, and then you would be right back after the initial chemicals left the body. You know, you're right back to what you were, because you know they care about you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. So then, from another kind of employee staffing question, you know, from what you were saying earlier about, you know, you had employees that you'd then been promoted to like a GM of your new store and whatnot.
mhm.
How do you go about that? Like promoting from the inside, training an employee up to take on a more crucial, consequential role. What's your process there?
So this one, I mean, we got lucky, because that has been one of the scariest parts for me when it comes to expanding metazotics.
Sure.
It's Before I answer that, I'm going to tell you a story,
All right.
because
Let's go.
this
Story
is
time.
going to go right into it. I used to have when I wanted to make a point, this particular point, to my general manager teams that I would lead with the previous job, I would ask them, who's your number one competition in your area? And I'd point to one, and they'd say XYZ company.
Yeah.
Okay, who's your number one competition? ABC company. But don't you have XYZ company in your area? Yeah. Okay, and I go through this, and basically the point I was showing them was, first, that they all had the same competitors in their areas. But in this area, this one is the main competition. In this one, it's another one. And so it wasn't the same company in every area. And I said, okay, do they have the same product? Meaning, does XYZ company have the same product, the same kinds of glasses
Yeah.
in every one of their stores? Yes. Okay, do they run the same specials in every store, in every city across the country at XYZ company? Yes. Okay, then why is XYZ the number one competitor in your area, but not in your area? The difference is only one thing: the people. The people in those locations are what make this store the top competitor in that area, where in this store it's not. And so my fear when opening another Metazotics was, how do I ensure that the culture that is in the flagship store moves to the next one?
Yeah.
And moves to the next one. And it's not saying that you can't have that by hiring from the outside. You certainly can if you get the right individual.
Sure.
But it's a lot easier when you've homegrown that individual, and you know. And with our first GM, Ox, I will tell you, he had me do something I've never done in the 20 years of being, you know, in these roles. Ox is 18 years old, and I've given him our store.
Wow.
In fact, he's still in high school. He's
Yeah.
tested out of a bunch of classes, and he goes to school for the one class. He graduates in May. Otherwise, he's working full time, you know, with us. And the reason we did it is because I could see his intelligence. I could see his work ethic.
Yeah.
I could see how fast he's also got a strong learning index. So it's not just being smart, it's how quick he can pick up new things. That really goes far. And his passion for it. I mean, this guy wanted to do so much in everything. He's learned so many facets of the business. And so the only area that I needed to develop him on was leadership. He needed, you know, guidance in that, and that's what we do. And that's kind of the program we've put him on, is, you know, and a lot of that comes with time and mistakes. And, you know, here's how to handle that. And I've always been of the mindset where if you make a mistake, just make sure you've made a decision and you can tell me how you got to that decision. And as long as you can explain that, the worst you're going to get from me is, next time, let's do it this way. You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, okay, that's very interesting about him being 18, because that's how old I was when I had similar kind of position. So, what what's your process of preparing someone who's that young for a role, as you know, in a management type position, GM role? And more even specifically, how do you prepare that individual for managing people who are potentially significantly older than them
Hmm.
and may not respect them just based on age alone?
Well, I'll tell you, he's got two individuals that he manages over there. That one is older than he is, so he's getting to experience that right off the bat. The other is a good friend of his that was the nursery guy before him,
Okay.
and he came back to work because he went to college. Had to part ways with us because of the distance, but the Henderson store is closer to where he's going to school. So he
Okay.
came back as soon as,
Nice.
we were opening that. But they're good friends. So that gives him two individuals where he could have leadership conflict. You have an individual that, is older than you. And
Right.
so you're having to lead them, but you also have your buddy who
That's the harder
looks
one.
at you as a buddy. Right. And
That's
so
tough.
we just had conversations on what that needed to look like. And there's nothing wrong with being friendly. There's nothing wrong with having fun with these individuals, but establishing what is
Yeah.
you have to show why you're in the role. And it's not because you're the boss. It's because of that work ethic. It's because of the problem solving.
Yeah.
It's because of, that personality. It's all that. And whenever there's a conversation that has to be had where, okay, you're requesting too many days off, he gets in there and he has the conversation. And
Yeah.
the more he does those steps, the more he's looked at as the leader. He's the guy or the girl,
Yeah.
whoever is in that role. So, and it's a lot of, okay, let's go back through that conversation and critiquing how that went. This was good. You may want to, sometimes it's prepping before the conversation where it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. It's whether it's, if you're
Sure.
having this rough conversation, you don't have to deliver it in a gruff manner.
Yeah.
It's, soften this, or this you have to stay firm faced on. It's just how you portray yourself during it makes a big difference in how it's received.
Sure. Absolutely. Cool. Well, we are at that about midway point of the episode. We're going to go to our commercial break real quick, but everyone stick around. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. Green tree pythons, emerald tree boas, and plenty other arboreal snakes have been quite the popularity here at the Trap Talk Reptile Network, which brings me to today's sponsor, the Reptile Perch. Head over to the reptileperch.com and Reptile Perch on Instagram. See what type of design PVC perch is best for your arboreal reptile. But first and foremost, I would also check out David Brom's Green Tree Python availability on the website. And you can also check out his Instagram just to stay current on any projects or any productions that he posts. Thank you so much, David Broms, for your ongoing support. Looking forward to seeing what you have to show in the 2025 season. When you think about building a good community and being a leader of that community, nobody comes to mind better than Mark Hager over at Texas Chondros. That's right. Make sure you head over to TX Chondros on Instagram and also head over to Mark's website. See what he has available Green Tree Python wise, and be ready for quite the 2025 Green Tree Python breeding season out of Mark Hager. He's a veteran in the Green Tree Python game, one of the best and nicest breeders in the Green Tree Python game. He's been putting on the whole state of Texas for as long as I've known him. So if you want to see all the amazing other chondro keepers out of the state of Texas, another good reason to go follow Mark Hager over at TX Chondros on Instagram. And again, head over to his website, texaschondros.com. You can find all the links in the description below. Thank you so much, Mark Hager, for supporting the Trap. Cheers. One of the biggest growths we have in the reptile industry today are the rare species of reptiles that aren't worked with. That's right. That's why I went ahead and partnered up again with Brian Susan over at SUNDOWN Reptiles. Brian works with species such as kahua geckos, gargoyle geckos, all species of tree monitors. He works with abronia and many other cool species geckos that you can check out all on his website. Head over to sundownreptiles.com, see what he has available. Brian's one of the best doing it in the reptile industry today. He's been on the show multiple times, so make sure you check out all of Brian Susan's episodes on Trap Talk Reptile Network. But more importantly, for the highest quality of captive bred reptiles, make sure you head over to sundownreptiles.com and make sure you give him a follow on Instagram. Thank you again, Brian Susan over at Sundown Reptiles. One of the things I love about being a part of the reptile industry is all the learning, okay? Learning can be fun, and I can prove that to you. Thank you so much to today's sponsor, Gary Scavino over at gs.reptiles. I highly recommend you head over to his YouTube channel, follow all this man's content when it comes to learning about rare species of snakes you could be keeping in the hobby, and also just finding out how easy a lot of these rare species of snakes are to keep in general. So thank you so much, Gary Scavino of GS Reptiles. Again, head over to his YouTube channel. Also head over to his Instagram to be on top of all of his current work and be ready for a big year over at GS Reptiles. Thank you so much, Gary, for your ongoing support. I really appreciate it. Choo!
Alrighty, everybody, we are back. So another question on the retail store side of things. What was the process of figuring out how you wanted to stock your dry goods? What products, what volume, kind of the balancing it out. How did that go? Because I'd have to imagine that could probably be a process of a lot of trial and error as to what, you really need to have in your store.
So that was a lot of learning. I mean, that really took a lot of learning on my end. And here's another piece of business that individuals don't really, I want to give a different perspective on inventory specifically. Inventory is an investment, and it's an investment that you do not get back until the day you sell your company. And here's how I'll explain that.
Okay.
So if you take $50,000 and you spend that on purchasing inventory, and let's just say you're going to have 50% margin, which means at that point, you're going to sell that 50,000 for 100,000.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're thinking, well, you've already now, you've made your money back and you've made $50,000. Oh, whoa. No, because that's only true if you're done, and you're not done, because every one of those items that you sold out of that 50,000, you have to buy again. You have to replenish it. So that 50,000 is a perpetual 50,000 that you're continuous. So if that was just dollar bills instead of product, that you're taking these dollar bills and selling them for $2 bills, you're constantly having to replenish that 50,000. So that $50,000 you do not have, again, you do not get back until you sell your business and someone has to buy your inventory from you. So, and then you think, well, but you've made 50,000. Okay, well, that 50,000, 50% margin that you have now, that's where all your expenses get chopped out of, and you may end up with this little bit. So understand that growing your inventory, while important, it does take capital either from the get-go or over time. And that's one of my most proudest moments here with Metazotics, is seeing how much we've grown our inventory levels and the diversity of the inventory carried, because that is all money from Metazotics, meaning we're reinvesting into our business by doing this and expanding more and more. So keep that in mind, guys, when operating that whatever you put in on inventory, you're not getting back unless you sell your company. So that it is, that's kind of the mentality that you need to have with it.
Sure.
So in the beginning, I mean, I was buying the things that I'm like, yeah, I use this, and I really had to go so much further with it. So things like various substrates, substrates I wasn't using before because I wasn't keeping those kinds of animals, or UVB, that again, I wasn't really using that. Now we really need to get into feeder insects. Oh my gosh. So we talked about, that feeders are 27.3%, of the business, but out of that, insects actually make up about 65% of our feeder business.
Not surprised.
Yeah, we do more volume in insects than we do in rodents. But that just wasn't computing for me because I wasn't a lizard guy. I didn't realize how much, that you would go through. So as we continued to, I would see the different areas that did well. I would want to expand those, but then I'd also have to look at, okay, is a certain categories, because I have like food and supplements, water dishes, husbandry, and these are my separate categories that I'm able to break apart and check out. So I would look at, if this is doing well, this category, I may need to expand that category and carry even more. Like substrates, for example. I continue to expand what substrates we carry to continue to give more variety. But there's also some where it's a particular category where, yeah, there may be 50 different options, but if I put all 50 in this store, there's only 15 of them that are going to regularly sell. So shrink that, get yourself maybe 20 and keep that, in line.
Yeah.
But your consumables are the things that you really want to ensure that you have on hand. And that's going to be your substrates. That's going to be your feeders. That's going to be your heat lights, your UVB, your thermostats, things like that. Things that people will go through, and need new.
Sure.
But you want to start small and have a bit of variety. I would originally, when purchasing things, I'd get 3 to 5 of them. And what I mean is not 3 to 5 types, like 3 to 5
units
of these medium water bowls, of these 3 to 5 of these large water bowls.
Yeah.
And as soon as they'd sell, I kind of would start to flex up what we would have. So if I bought 3 and we sold 2, I'd buy 4 to get myself up to 5.
Sure.
And so I'd start getting to where I would expand it. And then what that did for me is, if I bought 3 of something and 6 weeks later I still have 3, okay, that's probably the right level for me to keep on hand.
Sure.
But if I bought 3 and sold 2 that first week, all right, let's move it to 5 or 7. And okay, now you've sold 5 within 2. Okay, let's move it up to 12. And so it was a lot of learning, right out of the gate. Now, whenever I'm trying something new, I don't go all out, but I do want it to have enough of a presence where it actually catches the eye when you're looking on the shelves.
Okay.
So it's got to be presentable, and that's, your merchandising will take place, meaning merchandising is how you present your merchandise on the shelf. How clean it is, where it is. In fact, when you walk in our store, our shelves are diagonal when you first step in. And that's because I didn't want there to be a feeling of a wall.
Right.
Block.
Yeah. It's a good idea.
It invites you to
Sure.
walk down, those aisles. So yeah, I mean, and really all of it comes into play. Decor, I mean, it all moves. I mean, people, especially now, like you couldn't go anywhere else anywhere nearby to get bioactive stuff, the things you need to make bioactive enclosures. But bioactive and naturalistic, enclosures are really what's becoming more and more popular.
Sure.
And it's, we're going to carry everything you need. And hell, you know what? It may be scary to build a bioactive. So in fact, instead of just carrying the stuff, we're actually going to make bioactives that are here. Take it. It's ready. Put your lizard in it. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
So we have grab and go bioactives, here in the shop that are
very
rocking.
cool.
We have Cece is one of our individuals here that cranks those things out, and they are gorgeous when she does it. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen some stores do that, and it's a great idea because, at least the way that I look at it, when a new keeper is going to want to have their animal in something nice, or someone who's just like a pet level, not that a breeder wouldn't, but when you're first into it, that's, everyone's setting up something naturalistic or bioactive, but even the thought of beginning to do that yourself is so daunting that the idea of being able to come into the shop, get your animal, get your enclosure all the way set up and leave is just like, it's got to be super enticing.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it's then, and here's the Cresty right here to go with it. And it's whenever you explain to an individual all the benefits of, a bioactive enclosure, how easy it makes keeping this animal, especially when we get first timers in, this is going to be their first reptile. I want something that's going to be easy. a crested gecko inside of a bioactive enclosure, it doesn't get any easier than that. I mean, it's the simplest reptile, you can keep at that point.
Sure.
And the last point I'll make on inventory to, again, for individuals who are looking to do this kind of thing, when we originally opened Metazotics, we spent $5,000 on inventory.
Okay.
And it was light. When we opened our Henderson location, we spent about about $30,000 on inventory to start it. And that was still, it was a good amount for that size store, but still 50,000 is probably going to be where, if I had just money to throw, that's about the number I would be targeting for opening new locations, to equate what we're usually after here.
Okay. Got a couple questions in the chat. First of all, how do you go about product resourcing when the time has come to expand a category or product? Or I'm bad at reading out loud, but was there an aha moment where you realized we should expand this or that, something similar like that? So yeah, the process of adding products to your line, product research, that type of stuff.
So it's first feel the market. And I know how it sounds so vague, but when you're doing it every day, you're starting to get a feel, not just in your store, but kind of globally and nationally and regionally. And that's where I knew bioactives were becoming more and more of the thing. I mean, you've got Josh's Frogs, you got Bio Dude, you got, so many individuals that it's really kind of cranking. So knowing that obviously took me in that direction. You also, if you have good reps, like I work with Exoterra, Zoomed, I've got great reps from both of those companies. They'll let me know about new products and tell me what's coming out. And some of them I'm like, I don't know if that's going to really do much here. Others I'm stoked. I mean, that's going to be awesome. So that really, really helps. And the more you're doing it, obviously they want their product in your stores. So they're going to give you as much information as they possibly can, to entice you, on that. And it's also, sometimes I'll see something new and I'm like, you know what, I'll get one of them and I'm just going to play with it and see, what it's like. And, sometimes, it's funny too, because there's times where the packaging makes a difference. If it's a product that I'm on the fence where I'm like, I don't know if it's going to do well. And then I see the packaging and the packaging is bland. It's no point. Now, if it's a product I think is great, packaging's not going to matter to me because we're going to ensure the customer knows about it.
Yeah, sure.
But, so there's pieces like that to, keep in mind that you're selling to human beings and we react to things. I say we react to things in different ways, which is true, but 95% of the people react the same way to the same things. That's just kind of the way that we are as a species. So you can always say, yeah, but what about if you deal with this kind of person? If we spend time talking about the 5%, I'm wasting your time. Talking about the 95% is what's actually going to make your business move, because those are the people you got to cater to. But there was, let's see, the other question was the aha moment where you realized, oh, we should expand into this. Well, like I said, the bio was definitely one. Seems like there was, okay. This isn't a product, it's an animal, but it ties into product.
Okay.
So bearded dragons. If there's anything that has helped Metazotics succeed, it's bearded dragons, hands down. And one in particular has really catapulted us. It's Sriracha. He's this beautiful, huge red dragon that we have on display in a huge enclosure. Everybody's able to come in, pick him up, hold him. He's the most popular reptile in the tri-state. We take him to schools, take him all over the place. Everybody wants his babies. And for every baby bearded dragon, that's an enclosure, that's UV setup, heat setup, substrate, and feeders every week.
Yeah.
So I'm almost willing to give you the damn dragon because of everything else you're going to have to get. So that was a big aha moment for me, was when realizing not only how much they are loved, bearded dragons are loved, because they got the perfect little chill personality, that people are looking for. So when I realized how much bearded dragons are loved, how popular sriracha was, it made me really expand the different things that we keep for bearded dragons, the caging, the lighting, everything, because it's like, you know what, this is going to be one of our main staples. We expanded our breeding colony of bearded dragons. And so that was probably one of the aha was, okay, this one item leads to so many other items in that realm. We should expand in that direction.
Okay.
So.
Very interesting. That makes sense for sure. Yeah, I kind of want to go back to something you mentioned a second ago about that like 95% market of, you know, people looking for the most general things. Reminds me of something that that Brian Barczyk had talked to me about, you know, obviously a long time ago, but rest in peace, Brian Barczyk, about his philosophy of with his content was that he separated the world of people who are into reptiles into two categories. It was, and he called them the Tinley Parkers and the non-Tinley Parkers. And a Tinley Parker is somebody who goes to Tinley Park or would want to go to Tinley Park. And then that other group is everyone else, people who probably don't even know what Tinley Park is. So I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're running a retail store, you're probably getting mostly non-Tinley Parkers. But people who are using social media, breeding on a smaller scale, whatever it be, maybe breeding specialized animals, your clientele are probably Tinley Parkers. So we're not used to that type of client. What's different about that type of reptile, you know, enthusiast, and how do we, as those who are really into it in the nitty gritty, kind of reach out towards that side of the market as well?
So it's first you have to step back, because if we're really into it, if we're really into the nitty gritty, we usually have our lane that we're in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That this is kind of I don't necessarily want to say niche, but it's more of this is the path that you walk, and these are the people you talk to, and these are the animals you like. So the first thing is you kind of have to separate yourself out of that and start seeing the beauty in them all, even the brown snakes, for those that know that joke. So, but it's, and luckily that's pretty easy for me, where frogs, for example, never really were a thing for me until the first time I fed a Pac-Man frog here. And I'm like, oh my God, that was awesome. You know, first it's angry and it's pushing it away, and then it just says, it shuts it all in its mouth. And I'm like, that was so cool. So it's, you know, whenever you get that, you have to understand that people who are walking in, you don't want to look down on them for not being into what you're into, you know, and it's instead, and this is, it doesn't matter if you're doing a retail shop or not. I mean, like, this is plug for Colubrid Fest. That's what Colubrid Fest was all about, was it's really just that community and understanding that it's okay to appreciate all of this, you know, and we're all, we like, even if we like something a little different, I don't care if you like vanilla ice cream or, you know, chocolate ice cream or strawberries with sprinkles. We're all in the ice cream joint, you know, we're here to get ice cream. So it's when I step back and I really wanted to make sure that that's understood. And there's a fear, there's a curiosity, but a fear with that group, because so much is still new. Sometimes their excitement is where you need to calm them down, because their excitement will get them in trouble, where they're, you know, hey, I really love that green tree python. It'd be my first snake. Let's talk about that, you know, on where that's could be problematic. You know, I don't want to discourage you from getting a green tree python eventually, but maybe let's start with something else first. And here's why. But then you're going to get the ones that come in that I get a lot of families, and that's all, that this is their first reptile. And I can't tell you the number of families that they've become such regulars, and they've got 10 reptiles. And when they got their first one at Metazotics, and now there's so many, and they become friends. I mean, there's one individual that just is a great story. So they came in, they ended up getting their first reptile from us. Now they've got several. He attended Colubrid Fest. The father. He's a regular. He's a friend. We I mean, have so much in common. But hadn't met until he came in and, you know, shopped. Well, he went to Colubrid Fest. He listened to a talk on egg binding. And during that talk, it was from Dr. Whitman. It was a talk on, he said that nest boxes, the fact that we use clear nest boxes so often is a problem. They need to be completely darked out. That's where snakes are laying eggs in the wild, in completely dark areas. And that reduction in stress helps them pass all the eggs.
Sure.
Well, this individual happens to be an engineer. He has designed this blacked out nest box with an awesome entrance that none of the substrate inside dumps out. It's great. We've got them manufactured. I just launched them in the store this week.
Nice.
But that whole story from they came in and got their first reptile with us to now there's brand new products that the industry hasn't had on my shelf because of this relationship and the development of it. So it's understanding you're going to get questions that you want to roll your eyes at. And, but we were all like that at some point. We all didn't know what we were doing until we learned what we're doing.
Yeah.
And hopefully, even if we've been doing it forever, we still know there's a lot of things where we still don't know what we're doing.
100%.
So I think there is a universal language, though, whether it's someone at Tinley or someone who's never even heard of Tinley, it's passion. It doesn't matter if someone's been doing this for 30 years or someone who's been in your store for 30 seconds. If they feel your passion, you're going to connect.
Yeah.
And you're going to get through whatever you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to throw this in here. This is quite the high compliment. A reptile store not smelling like a reptile store, especially one that has rodents in it. That's it's quite the impressive feat right there. That's for damn sure. Because all of us have walked into that pet store and been like, oh, all right, this is a pet store. I'm here.
I tell you, that's actually, I'll get specific on that because that was hands down something I was adamant about, that it's not going to happen. So we've got 2 rodent rooms, one for mice, one for rats, that are just off of the showroom and towards our warehouse area. We have carbon scrubbers in both of them. And what carbon scrubbers are is they're basically used in like weed growing facilities they suck in that air, purify it, put it back out. What that'll do is it knocks the smell back significantly, but it doesn't do anything for ammonia. So if I just ran those, you'd walk in and your eyes would still burn.
Yeah, sure.
So instead, we've put a lot of money into having a system where it pulls the air out of those 2 rooms, shoots it right out of the building.
Yeah.
So they're on their own heat and AC units and everything. So if I walk through it, if I smell rodent, I'm not, who left that door open? It's not happy with that. So that's something that was very, very important to us from the beginning.
That's awesome. Well, Alex, I'm gonna throw it over to you. I know you have a question, and I feel bad for taking all this airtime up, but
no, this has been great. I am learning way more than I think I've had on quite a few podcasts I've listened to in a while. Like I have zero experience with the business mindset of this. This is it's new, and I'm very much enjoying it, to say the least. And I apologize if I'm stuttering because I'm also mentally exhausted from how long of a day I've had. But that being said, question I had for you, Clint, is that I sort of step back to the marketing aspect. You're the store, it's the specialty shop. Mm-hmm. But how much has your role with the CCR podcast, would you say, has had an influence on the success of Metazotics? Like, is it a thing at shows, like I'm buying from you because I listen to the show, but I can't drive to Indiana? Do you get that from customers? Do you hear that from your employees? I feel like that's a very niche area to have as a business, if that makes sense.
I've said before, there's times I've talked to some of the reps, the product reps, and because that's where another avenue that I'll get a feel for the market, how are other people doing in other areas? And, he would ask me how I'm doing. I'm like, we're killing it. We're this % comp. And he's like, you're the only one. All of his other accounts were struggling. And I go, well, one of the things we have on our side is we've got national advertising for free, and that's CCR.
Yeah.
And what that will do is absolutely people will come up to us on They'll come to us at shows. There's, obviously this level of expectation on what we're going to bring. Everybody wants to see, what Metazotics has at the table because of they hear us talk on, the show.
Yeah.
And I cannot count the number of emails that start off with, "Hey, I love the program, love the show, love the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm interested in this animal," something on the website. And it certainly helps. Now, I'll say only 7.2% of our business is online sales. So
Okay.
it helps. It certainly helps. But that's our local business because it's like 7.2% online. I think 5.6% shows. And so the rest is all right here in shop.
Yeah.
But it's definitely caused, a lot more attention. In fact, Corey just the other day was at PetSmart because she has dogs and she was going into PetSmart to get some stuff. And one of the PetSmart workers goes, she had her Metazotic shirt on. And he goes, "You're the new nursery person, right?" And they listen to the show, they hear us talk about it, and they've recognized, they know who everybody else is. And so they didn't recognize, her, and they knew who she was. And like Ox, he gets recognized even before he started doing shows. He didn't even have his Metazotic shirt on and people knew who he was. At shows that were like an hour and a half from us, 2 hours away. So yeah, that show has definitely done great things for Metazotics, and I couldn't be more grateful for it. I am so lucky and so honored to be able to be a part of it. And it's not even about the popularity. It's what we're getting to do now in the industry because of that. I mean, the nonprofit we've been able to open, Colubrid Fest and this gathering, that's been created. All of that is, and we're just, I gotta tell Zach, we're just getting started, man. We're just getting started on what we're going to be able to do with conservation and, and starting to unite with, so many others. It's definitely been a massive benefit for us. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and podcasting has done so much to change this industry. I mean, think about, the landscape of podcasting 10 years ago compared to now and how different our industry is. I mean, what do you think some of the main changes that podcasting has brought to the industry are?
Oh, well, it's one, you can get expert knowledge on a type of animal that you're not going to find if you Google. If you Google red-tailed rat snakes, you're going to find out what their temperature needs are, their humidity needs, and what they eat. And if you're lucky, you'll find someone who's written a book on it, right?
Right.
But for most species, that's not out there. So with podcast, you get to hear those nuances. You get to hear the way that they get a species to eat. Or, I've learned that at this temp, I get this reaction. At this temp, I get that reaction. Or, just all these little pieces from the people who are working with them every single day that are never going to write a book. It's there. That knowledge only exists within, it's tribal. It's talked about, but it's not written. It's not in academics, So I think podcasting has certainly helped that. I think that it has allowed podcasting and really, I'm going to combine podcasting and YouTube, together because it's helped bring so many people into the hobby. You had Brian Barczyk, obviously everything he's done.
Yeah.
Alex Snake Discovery. I love what they do. We have individuals like that who really turn so many eyes onto reptiles. And before them, obviously it was television. It was Steve Irwin. It was Jeff Corwin. But now with podcasting, it almost becomes more real, I guess, because you're hearing it like, a few of us who are just sitting on the couch talking about snakes. It's that vibe and that feel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes it easier to digest and it gets deeper into the information. Where like a television show, it's a little bit more theatrical. It's but this gets into the meat of it. So podcasting, and I think it's such a great form because like right now, we have individuals who are interacting with us on this show. We have individuals who are going to watch this, but there's a lot of us who are just going to be able to listen to this while cleaning snake crap, in our snake rooms, right? Or our lizard rooms. And that's having the ability to digest this media in all those different forms really make it a powerhouse. And I think I told, so here's another piece that it was a little bit more behind the scenes with CCR. Max knows about this, as do some of our Patreon subscribers. So when you want to talk about the power of a podcast, are you guys familiar with the podcast Serial?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
So the very first season of Serial, it was a investigative journalist who basically felt that this individual was wrongly accused. He's been for murder. He's been locked up for a long time. Well, because of the in-depth reporting she did and how that podcast was put out there, not only did it get wildly popular, it actually got enough attention that the case was looked at again. That individual is now free.
Yeah.
And it's because, it's show after show getting deeper and deeper into this story. And there's not really much of that in the Reptile podcast yet, where there's a deep dive investigative story. There's one that we're tossing around doing. It would
only lead to more convictions in our industry.
Yeah, it would. But it's even if it's just the story. Like, I'll give you an example.
I'm making a joke.
Like, one of the examples I'd always toss out is, we know that we can't get imports in from Australia anymore.
Yes.
Right? But why? What's the story behind that? What's the story of, what was being imported before? Where did it decide to be changed? So it's just that whole history of it. Things like that really don't get reported. And on the Animals at Home podcast, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. When he did the episode on the Reptile King, that's the same one that did the Tiger King and then Chip Crazy, and now is doing one on reptiles.
Yeah.
The way he did that is exactly what I'm talking about, where he went through all the characters, meaning the history of the individual that is directing and, producing that show, and how I love the way he did that episode. And it's like, I wish we had more of that in the reptile, community, just because of the history that it would give us, But again, for what we have right now, I'm loving it. I think it's great because the way the information can be digested is probably the best way for us to be able to take it in as a society at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with your characterization of the podcast taking it to a level of intimacy above the YouTube videos, and YouTube is a step down from TV. For me, like, I made it through high school on Morelia Python Radio. Like, if it wasn't for them, shoot, I don't even know if I'd be here right now. But like every Tuesday, it was like, I'm getting to hang out with my snake friends who I've never met. It's it's a function of the times these days, but like you were saying, just invaluable for someone who's trying to learn about what we're doing here.
And I when you just said, the intimacy of it, that was one of the things I loved at this last Tinley, is how many individuals I'd never met before in my life walked up and asked me, "So how's your other shop doing?" And knowing it's because of them listening every other week that we're on and hearing the updates and following along, and they had a vested interest at that point on really wanting to know how, and it just made me feel so good that's that community feel, that's that, just again, kind of tearing down walls. So
yeah, absolutely. I want to take it back a little bit to another retail question. Within this industry, it's pretty rare that individuals start a business with previous business experience under their belt, like real serious business experience. So what are some aspects from the optical retail world that you like directly transferred into what you're doing now that you probably wouldn't have been able to figure out otherwise if you hadn't had that experience under your belt?
Fully understanding my margins.
Okay.
That's one. Margins are a real big piece. And For those who don't know, margins are going to be, I don't like calling it profit because there's a lot of things that come out before you really get to call it profit.
Yeah.
But it's if you buy for X and you sell for Y, what's the difference in there? And your percentages on margins. For example, most pet stores typically operate around a 40% margin, and there was no way I was going to let that happen. I mean, that's just too low. Typically because I was used to coming from a business where the margins are like 82, 83 if you're doing well.
Yeah.
So we're usually somewhere around 60%. Now, in order for us to achieve that 60% margin doesn't mean we have high prices, because if I put high prices, we're just going to get
Sure, you're not
walk past.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. In fact, our retail model here is that word retail. Sometimes it comes with a negative connotation. Like people think retail, you think markup. And what we have here is basically our dry goods are going to be the same prices you're going to pay if you looked online. You know what I mean? We're very competitive that way. Our animals are breeder pricing, not retail pricing.
Okay.
So if you see an animal in the deli cup at a show, that's the same price it is at the shop, same price it is online. So that was one of the things I was dead set on, is I didn't want to take, because I used to make the point so often at other pet stores, is you don't need to try to sell everything for 3 times what you bought it for, or even 2 times. It's go lower and sell everything that goes with it, and that's going to be smarter. So I really wanted to ensure that if we produced as many of the reptiles as possible, and we typically about 85% of what we sell we've produced ourselves.
Okay. It's a lot.
But if I'm buying from other individuals, we want to buy from our best. We want to get top quality. We want to work with good breeders.
Sure.
But I'm also upfront. I'm very upfront, where I tell them, because if they ask me, hey, I've got these, are you interested? What's your price? Because I'll be honest with you, you will probably be able to get more for it from someone else. Because in order for me to buy it, I have to buy it at a price where it's low enough for me to be able to make the right margin on it.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be 60% in that case.
Sure.
But I have to make enough margin on it but still be able to sell it at breeder pricing.
Yeah.
Because that's who we are. That's how we operate.
Right.
And when it comes to animals and buying animals, you're taking a risk, because even if that animal is completely, looks completely healthy, if you don't have enough room to make your proper margins, what happens when one of them dies? Now you've got 4 others that if you want to get your margin, their price is about to go up. So I really have to make sure that if I'm purchasing an animal, it's going to have to be at a price that's going to make sense for us as a business, and on the back end makes sense for our customers, because it's not going to be pet store pricing here. It doesn't work like that. It's not who we are.
Yeah. No, makes sense for sure. All right, Alex, throw it to you again for another question.
So your emphasis on breeder pricing, if we could take a step back, in your case, originally starting with Bartley Reptiles, you were hobbyist breeder, but I'd imagine you did that as your own small business. How would you say, for the people listening, what determines whether or not somebody's ready to transition to a retail setting and breeding?
Good question.
Because, like you said, for you to make that margin with what you're doing now, you would have to buy something significantly cheaper, or, as you suggested, as your example, somebody could sell a snake and get more for it themselves. What's the shift in thinking, I guess?
There's a few things that if you are going to step from breeding to retail, the first question you have to ask is, do you like people? And you have to be real serious with yourself when you ask that question, because you can love the animals all you want to, but whenever you go retail, I'm lucky if I interact with 3 or 4 animals in a day, because as a business owner, I am doing everything else.
Right.
And the bulk of owning anything where you're dealing with the public face to face, retail specifically, you've got to enjoy talking to people, because that's what you're going to be doing with the majority of your time. So start with that question, because if you don't really like, if you're like, well, I don't really like people, but I can handle it. You can handle it here and there. You can handle it at a show, 1 weekend a month, but every single day for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you're going to be the face of your business. So you've got to be able to handle that. So start there. If the answer is no, don't move into retail. There are other ways you can still grow your business. And I guess I'm going to kind of divert this question into a bigger answer, but I'm going to answer it for you at the same time. I try to. If you are breeding in your basement or in a bedroom right now, and you're like, I want to do this on a bigger scale, there are so many things you can do in this industry with that aren't retail. You can, if you're like, I want to do it all from home. If you can do it all from home, hell yeah, your overhead's going to be a lot smaller, and it's a lot easier, to do that.
For sure.
You're going to have to get good at taking pictures, good at posting things online, keeping your social media presence up, and keeping your name out there, traveling and doing more than just your local shows. You're going to have to get out there and do some shows further out. But you can do that. Or if you're like, what, I love the animals. I love taking care of them, breeding them, producing them, but I don't like people and I don't really want to do shows. Okay, wholesale. Hook up with people like me that'll buy what you produce. And, you're not going to make as much money, but they're going to be out of your way quicker. Your expenses are going to stay lower, and you're going to get to continue to do what you love to do within the hobby. So there are other avenues you can go other than just opening retail. But if you're like, yes, I love people, this is what I want to, I love people and I don't care about making a whole lot of money because trust me, there are more lucrative jobs out there. I mean, in fact, for the first 18 months, I didn't take a paycheck from Metazotics, at all. And I was working 7 days a week for the first 6 months, 6 days a week for probably 6 to 8 months after that. And I'm about 5 to 5.5, 6 now. So, understand that in your first few years, that's going to be the case. So make sure that you've got enough living expense or your family dynamic works the way that can allow that to happen.
Sure.
So if you're going to look at your, moving to the retail spot, there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to want to take into account and do your research beforehand. Okay. What's the rent like? If you're looking at leasing an area, we bought our building because for me, it wasn't just going to be retail. We were going to be retail. We were going to be traveling to shows. We were going to be online. I wanted to have a warehouse because my thought was if this does go the way I need it to, this is going to be a distribution center for our other locations.
Sure.
And so I need to be able to get things in and then disperse out. But if you are, you're looking at opening a shop, start feeling out what's available from a commercial standpoint for you to lease, and what does that rental rate look like? Because basically you're going to have to calculate what all your expected expenses are for a month, and then double that. That's the number that you have to hit in sales to break even. Because you're basically, if you figure about 50% margin is probably going to be accurate for most people.
Okay.
That's how you calculate it. Like right now, our Henderson store, I have that calculated out, and luckily we're either breaking even or a little above, so far each week.
Yeah.
Because I take it down to weekly. Here's the number we have to hit in order for us to keep the doors open and the lights on, based on, product sales. So, so look into that. You want to start getting a feel for insurance, what that's going to look like for you. You want to, depending on how busy you anticipate it being, you are going to want to open with as minimal staff as possible.
Sure.
Because, and the reason is because while you're going to be running around doing a whole lot yourself and you're going to be very stressed. And I just had Anna, our floor leader, the other day. She was looking at reels that Metazotics has posted over the past couple of years. And she goes, I'm sorry to tell you this, boss, but owning a business has aged you. Just from 2 years ago to now, you know what I look like in the reels. I'm like, thanks.
Like, damn, all right, you gotta
Yeah.
cut that yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate it. Get back to work. So, but it's because once you have employees, they're going to need to be paid whether you have sales or not.
Right.
You know, and if you want flexibility, when you do bring on employees, you want to have a good mix of part-timers as well as a handful of full-timers, but really the hours should be mixed. So if you have one full-time employee at 40 hours, you want two part-time employees at 20 apiece, or three part-time employees that equate to 40 hours. It gives you so much more flexibility. And it's typically, you know, with part-timers, it's like, okay, 20 hours this week, 12 hours next week, if you've got people who are going to be okay with that. But your full-timers, you're paying full-time every single week, no matter what. And that's, you know, it's hard when in the beginning, your business isn't going to be consistent. You're not going to be able to know exactly what it is until you get some time under your belt and popularity there. If you have a collection, that's going to help you, because you will, you know, obviously have animals, you know, that that you're producing yourself, and that's going to help your margins. It's also going to help you if you've already got a name for yourself out there. And reputation is very important in this industry. I mean, in this hobby, and it's something that I, again, take great pride in what Metazotics has been able to do, you know, with that, not just in you know, people knowing us at shows and in the industry, but I mean, if you go to Google, I think we've got somewhere around 115 to 120 reviews, and we're at a 4.9.
Wow.
I'll take it.
That's awesome.
So it matters, you know, it really does matter. But do all that, do your research, sit down and I mean, you can write a business plan all you want, but you're going to have more curveballs come at you than you ever can think of.
For sure.
So you can set an outline, but keep it flexible. Because for everything you think of, there's going to be 10 things you didn't. Trust me. And that's coming from all the experience I had. There was still so much. Everything cost $1,000 to get the electricity in your name under a business, because the business is new. Now you have to put, you know, your utilities in your name on the business. Everything's $1,000. Your phone's $1,000. It's crazy how that number just kept popping up all over the place. $1,000. So you're going to have more expenses than what you think.
Sure.
You know, coming into it. So, and I'm not discouraging you. That's not in any way what I want to do, because I love for more small businesses to start in this. I have a group chat with 3 other reptile specialty store owners in different areas, so we don't overlap, so we don't compete, but we give each other ideas and tips. And hey, here's where I'm getting this now, and you know, I get it at this price, or one of them breeds Australian species, you know, geckos, frilled dragons, things like that. Doesn't breed many snakes. I breed a ton of snakes. I don't breed any of the Australian stuff. So I send them a box. They send me a box, and you know, stuff like that. So if you start up a retail spot, shoot me a message, because if we can work to help each other out, I'm all for that. So not discouraging anyone at all. Just don't let your love of the animals blind you to the realities of the business and what you're going to have to deal with and do in order to ensure that it stays maintainable.
For sure. So what are some of those surprise expenses that somebody writing out a business plan may not account for in the moment where it's only pen on paper?
Well, for the deposits on your utilities, because you're going to think about, okay, well, electricity is probably going to be this amount per month. So you'll think about that on your rolling, but you don't think about out of the gate the deposit that you have to put down just to put it in your name.
Sure.
The insurance is going to be stupid. I mean, it's that really hurts. I mean, whenever you see what business insurance is going to cost you.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're going to have that piece there. Let's see. Whatever it is you think you're going to spend on remodeling or, you know, whatever as far as your building, it's going to be a lot more than that. Just trust yourself. It will.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm kind of walking through now on what some of the other surprises were. Security. Think about that. You're going to have, if you install ADT and, anything, it's, again, yeah, it's $70 a month or $50 a month, depending on what you have, but you're spending $600 or $700 in the beginning to get all that equipment installed in the first place.
Yeah, for sure.
The fixtures that you're going to use as your displays are probably going to be more expensive than you think. Because again, you want to make sure that these animals can be seen in order to be sold.
Sure.
And so maybe you can build things yourself. If so, fantastic. But again, that's always going to be a little more. What else? You don't think about little things like needing freezers, and you're going to end up having to get those.
True.
Yeah, just kind of walking through in my head now and trying to think back when we first opened the other. Retail shelving. If you are utilizing retail shelving, your best bet is to find a business that's going out of business. And that's what we did. And luckily, I bought enough shelving that it supplied both of our stores, and the shelves that we use in our back stock here in Chandler. So I got incredibly lucky. If you try to buy that brand new, it's insane how much that costs.
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, retail shelving is very, very expensive. Signage. Your signs outside, you're like, you're big. If you've got, a lit sign, pylon sign, you're probably looking at a minimum $4,000 for one of those. So yeah, there's a lot of those things that you don't realize go into a business. And then the monthly expenses are usually a little higher than what you anticipate as well. So always give yourself cushion when planning that out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is not necessarily only a question related to retail, but just in anyone expanding or, taking their reptile business that they may have at home to a next level. And we see over and over again, people who are successful basement breeders, so to speak, if you want to just use that term for that scale, who decide, all right, I'm doing super well at this level and I have a lot of demand. I'm going to start a production facility or a retail store or a zoo or whatever it may be, and then give it a few years and they're upside down and it's a total nightmare. You should have stayed in the basement. What, in your opinion, are the reasons why those endeavors fall flat so quickly?
I think there's potentially 3 reasons.
Okay.
1, they didn't take into account the overhead that really exists. The expense that really, really exists whenever you move it out of the place you live.
Yeah.
It's incredible how much that jumps. The second, they overestimated the popularity, where they thought that they would have more traffic in than what they do. Or the third, and this happens a lot to breeders that expand too rapidly, which would still kind of fall into this.
Sure.
They didn't create the network that they needed to be able to move the numbers that they thought. So it's like the individual who, and not beating up on ball pythons, it just happens to be the segment that does this the most.
Sure.
Where someone will get into reptiles, they'll get into ball pythons, and then they have 60 ball pythons before they've produced their first clutch of eggs. And then when they breed all of these, because they see, oh, this is what they go for on Morph Market. No, that's what they list for on Morph Market. What they go for is a different story if they go at all. And that can be said about any species. Again, not beating up ball pythons, just simply that's where this happens most frequently.
Yes.
So one of the reasons I've been able to succeed on how, the way we've done this, I've built my network over 30 years, slowly.
Yeah.
30 years ago, I bred those black rat snakes, and then it's, you get a few more pairs and a few more pairs and a few more pairs. in each year, I always measured my success from a business standpoint. Whenever eggs started hatching, however many babies I had left over from the year before. The smaller that number, the more successful I was at what I was doing. And so if I only had 4 babies left from the year before, hell yeah.
Doing great.
Yeah. If I had 30, you change something.
Yeah.
So now, and that was a shift for me because now I can't let that happen. I always have to have babies. We always have to have, inventory. We always have to have animals to sell as a retail business. So that was a mental shift for me that I had to let happen. But because of, slowly growing the name and people knowing what you're working with, and, you get better at taking your pictures, your online presence gets, stronger, you start doing more shows, you get more recognized at shows. And eventually it's everyone, there's someone in the chat right now. You're going to know who you are when you hear this, because we want to be known for our animals, and that's great. But your animals shift. Your animals, other people will have those same animals. Eventually, they got to know you. You are who they are coming up to see.
Yeah.
They want to see what animals you have. So you have to become recognizable. You have to become, the person they just want to come talk to.
Sure.
So, with that, in mind, over those years, I've grown to where, year 1, I was lucky if I could sell 5 snakes.
Yeah.
Then eventually 50, and then 100, and then 300. And now, we sell thousands, over the course of a year, and not just snakes, but just reptiles as a whole.
Sure.
And I think that, to go back to your original question, when someone makes that big leap, I think sometimes they've done it too fast, because maybe they came in during a hot market. They come in during 2021.
Yeah.
And then in 2025, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So that's probably it. It's either they underestimated their overhead, overestimated their sales intake, and the third would be they didn't build their channels and their network enough to where if you have this many animals that aren't moving, how do you move them? Do you have the places for those to go? Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, man, there's a lot of stuff to think about when it comes to this. I feel like, especially given the last 5 or 6 years of the industry and the ups and downs, I feel like it leaves a lot of people with some uncertainty. So like, what do you make of the trends in the hobby right now? Popularity, total market size, the way sales have been changing throughout the recent history, because you see a lot more aspects of the industry than someone like me would, where I'm, just kind of mostly in a few niche markets here and there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of everything that's been going on, and where do you see it going in the kind of near to distant future?
So colubrids, pythons, excluding ball pythons, and things like certain monitors and other not so common lizard species are going to continue to gain in popularity. They're hands down. There's no doubt about it. That's happening. And some of the bigs they're not going to go away, but they're going to dip. We already know the pricing on ball pythons is falling. Crested geckos is falling. I think we're getting the mind shift now, because I do get asked often, what's the next big thing? What's the next big thing? And it's like, that's not where this is going, because there's only been a handful of big things ever in the reptile industry.
They fit a very specific few criteria that you can't apply to almost any reptile other than those.
No. So what's going to happen is people are going to continue to want to see different things. And so variety is going to continue to grow. The industry is not going away. Even ball pythons right now, they're still selling. They're just not selling for the prices that people want them to be selling.
Sure.
They'll still move. You just have to drop the price. Where colubrids continue to, hold true. They've gained since I've been tracking it for like a year and a half, they've gained about almost 4 points in market share, from ball pythons. And the crazy thing in that particular category, you've got hognose snakes making up 40% of the colubrid market right now. 40%, that one species.
Yeah, sure.
Then you have corn snakes making up 27% on top of that. So those two species make up 2/3 of the entire colubrid market. And we're talking about, when I say colubrids, you're talking 1,000+ species, that fall into that. So there's so much room, for all these to just elevate. And it's not about taking the pie. The pie is going to continue. It's not about taking a bigger piece. The entire pie is going to continue to grow, because going back to what we're talking about, podcasts, YouTubers, things like that are going to continue to bring in more and more, new faces. So what I'm getting is, and there's kind of price points that will dictate this too. You have where if an animal is less than $100, yeah, you're going to have the people that buy it, that just because that it was so cheap. But if it's less, really 150, if it's less than 150, it's kind of viewed, I don't want to call it a throwaway animal, I don't like that term, but it's not viewed as cool.
Sure.
Okay, it's common.
Yeah.
Now, if it's over $600, it's a rent payment. So when you get kind of in between that $200 to $500 range, that's where the animals fall that are affordable for a lot of people, but are still not so common in everyone's collection, that all their friends already have one.
Sure.
So it's different enough, cool enough, but affordable enough. So that's kind of what I'm seeing is going to continue to be the popular, but those might struggle for a little bit soon, maybe. Okay. And that's with what we're dealing with right now with the tariffs, and that's going to cause ripples if they don't get dropped soon.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm already talking to suppliers that, we can expect substrate pricing to increase. We're already seeing cage. I don't know if everyone saw the post from Darian from Dubia, and it's definitely going to hit us in different areas. But what that's doing is that's just in our industry. Those tariffs are going to affect things outside of the industry. And again, not to be political, I said this on CCR, we can argue back and forth if we want to, that eventually these are going to be great for the country. Okay, whatever. Yeah. We're not going to have that debate, but right now they suck. Okay, right now it's hurting, and it's going to hurt in a lot of other areas where the cost of living continues to rise. And if the cost of living continues to rise, it's going to hurt middle and lower class, which is the ones that are shopping the $200 to $500 range.
Yeah.
So things like the people who are going to walk in and drop $1,500 on an animal are still going to be able to walk in and drop $1,500 on an animal.
Sure.
But it's the bread and butter that's going to be where we take a hurting if things don't shift a little bit within the country soon on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned a little bit about the inflow of new people into the industry. Do you think that has stayed steady, or do you think that has decreased a little bit in the last couple of years?
Oh, I think it's steady.
Okay, good.
Absolutely steady. And I think that it's snake discovery is a big reason for that. They bring in a lot of younger viewers, and the excitement that they have on that show. It does it. Dave Kaufman, is another one. It's those YouTube personalities, because that's all my kids want to do is watch YouTube, so it's, they eat this stuff up. And whenever you have groups that are doing it in, a positive way, in a way that really brings, the right message out, it's going to continue to bring people in. And there's other reasons too, that before opening this, I was doing a study. I was writing the business plan, for Metazotics, and I think it was in 2019, I believe it was 2019, the number of reptiles in U.S. households exceeded the number of dogs and cats. It had passed them. Yes. Now, there are people like, there's a few of us who have hundreds of them that are kind of skewing that.
I offset the entire neighborhood.
Right. But, it still
it's
kind of shows what's happening there. And, when you go back and think about Steve Irwin and Jeff Corwin, and when they were wildly popular, the people that grew up watching them are now having, they have kids, they have, they have money to do things with. And so there's been a mind shift on reptiles, as a whole. Now we still have the people that kill a snake just because it's a snake, but if you take the population today versus the population 40 years ago, there's a much different view, on reptiles now than what there used to be, from a general standpoint. And that's going to continue to bring people in. You're also, I mean, they're less work. They take up less space. They, as we continue to have more and more issues with housing, people are in apartments, they're in smaller living quarters, they're in tiny houses, and you can have a leopard gecko a hell of a lot easier than you can have a dog whenever you're living in, these apartments. So that segment's going to continue to grow. New people are going to continue coming into this, every year. That pie is going to get bigger. We just need to watch how it gets cut up, I guess.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, one last question to close us out on. You're definitely someone who is very on top of all things happening in this industry. What do you think is the next innovation, be it a media type, something that pushes us to the next level, the way that YouTube did or podcasting did, or even that, not to completely equate it to animals, but the way that the ball python did? What do you think we're looking at as far as the next revolution, or potentially?
So it's funny. What I'm actually going to say is it's going to be kind of the opposite of that. When it comes to technology, there's things like, what is it, Palm Street? Things like where you're having live auctions and all that. That's going to gain some popularity. I have no doubt about that, because society's becoming very digitally interactive. And so the more that you can do that, the more you can interact with people without having to be face to face, it tends to like that. So that's going to certainly do some things. There's no doubt about it. But what I am feeling, and maybe this is just, maybe I'm off on this, but Colubrid Fest really opened eyes for me, I think for Zach, for everybody who attended that first one, and not trying to hype it up, but there's a reason I'm bringing it up. I think we've gotten so far away from the community vibe, and we have broken off into so many segments and pockets. That I think there's a yearning to have that again, like it used to be. Because think about how just divisive so much is out there right now, including even in our own industry.
For sure.
Where it's the feeling and the vibe that we had in that room, because there was a lot of old timers in that room, and they would talk about, this was how it felt 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of something that at least we're trying to grow and maybe help morph it back to where, if you can take all the digital we have and still wrap your arms around that community at the same time, then we become something powerful. We really do. USARC, at the beginning of your show, when we talk about that, and it's still, the community's not there yet. It's different. So it's, being able to really come together. And while I love what USARC does for us, it'd be great if it wasn't just USARC showing up whenever the community should be showing up. And the community policing itself. So I think that we will continue to see a shift in that. And I do feel that that's going to be partially because the ball python market's going to come down a little. And I say it because the ball python market has been great for a lot of things in the industry. New products have come out because of ball python money that's been dumped into the industry. Anyone who thinks ball python's been bad for reptiles, you've not paid attention.
Yeah, for sure.
It's done so many great things.
100%.
But it has also brought in a very heavy financial aspect, and where that's kind of what a lot of individuals are looking at is, the dollar signs. And as we see a shift going back towards reptile shows instead of just ball python shows, we're going to see more of that community start to be rebuilt, and not just, the separate of that click, this click, this click. That's the shift that I really see happening, and what's going to take place.
Yeah, That's a really interesting perspective, and I hope that happens, because that is definitely missing. I think that's a great observation. Well, Clint, I think that's a great spot to end the podcast on. Thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been a really amazing conversation. I could probably talk to you for another 2 hours about all this stuff. But,
I love it, man. I've had a great time, buddy.
yeah.
Very insightful.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's been great talking with you both.
So for everyone who is watching or listening who wants to keep up with you, either on the CCR side, Metazotics side, where can you be found?
The podcast is it's everywhere: YouTube, Spotify, and that's Colubrid Clubroid Radio with my co-host Dr. Zach Loafman. You can find us everything that we have available at any point at metazotics.com.
Okay.
You can always find me on Facebook, Clint Bartley, or Metazotics on Facebook, metazoticsllc on Instagram, or shoot me an email, metazotics@gmail.com.
All right. Hell yeah. Well, if you don't mind sticking around for a second, I have a couple questions I want to ask you quickly off camera while we after we sign out here. But once again, Clint, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Gladly.
All righty. All right, Alex. What an episode. That was all I'd hoped it would be and more. So that was amazing.
I was definitely a little quieter than I usually. I'm gonna have to give this a re-listen, just because this episode has really opened my eyes to how terrible of a businessman I very likely would be. I'm only good at breeding lizards. But as Clint said, yeah, I think the only reason I can sell lizards, though, is like Clint was saying, just the reputation. I mean, I still have all my old YouTube videos from 6-7 years ago getting views, and that's why people still buy water dragons. So talking to you earlier, dropped one off at FedEx today for a customer. So it does give me some inspiration. I don't know if I'm ever going to go to a grand scale by any means, but hopefully it sounds like I'm heading in the right direction as far as I'm slowly taking a couple pairs of water dragons to a couple groups, and hopefully something with the sail fins if the start of this episode is anything but promising for them.
Yeah, no, that is, I absolutely believe that you are going to make it happen and then some. So for everyone who wants to keep up with you, maybe inquire about water dragons, where can you be found on the old internet?
Yep. Instagram, Facebook, Morph Market, Fauna Classifieds, YouTube, alexsagamids. From there, it'll be able to take you to my email. There's like all the little buttons and stuff, and so that's the best way to reach out or submit inquiries. I guess I haven't really announced it. Like, I'm really excited for this year, water dragon wise, because I will have unrelated F1 captive bred animals in the works. So if somebody wants to look into pursuing a pair down the line or a group, you'd have the chance to make F2s from really good genetically diverse bloodlines. So whether people like it or not, all my water dragons except for one, which was a holdback, are wild caught. So I'm working with really good group, nothing that's related to anybody's in the United States, and I'm hoping to keep it that way.
Hell yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, we will definitely be keeping up on that as we do more episodes throughout the year. So everyone should definitely keep an eye and an ear out for that. For me, I'm on Instagram, scrubshepherd, Stephen Kush, Facebook, Kush Reptile on Morph Market, and YouTube as well. New videos every single Friday. And of course, I'm here every Wednesday on the Trap Talk Reptile Network. With all that said, thank you everybody for tuning in live tonight, for listening after the fact, and we will see you all back here next week for a new episode. Good night.